Hi everyone, and welcome to the channel. My name is Nick Cosgrove, and I am back with this week's No Filter Q&A. This is the episode where I answer all questions related to diet, training, and supplementation that I've received over the last 7 days from our in-house clients, online clients, as well as a few of our online followers. Remember, if you have any questions related to your nutritional plan, workout program, supplements you are currently taking, not taking, or considering taking, please feel free to email me those questions at nick@foreverfitperformance.com, or you can DM me your questions on my Instagram at fitcosgrove_. All right, let's get started with this week's no filter Q&A with question number one. Nick, what are the most common mistakes people make when trying to build muscle that actually slow down their progress? There's a few. The first one that comes to mind, though, is their diet. You see a lot of people who go to the gym, and there's a lot of these people who actually train quite hard. They're in the gym and they're pushing heavy weight and they're practicing good form, good technique, but then they leave the gym and they shit the bed on their diet. They're either not eating the right foods, not eating enough food, or eating too much food, right? So it's usually one of those three things. So what I generally recommend though to people when they start working out and they want to see significant change in their physique is they have to make sure that their diet is dialed in, which means you have to make sure your lean proteins are in check. Your moderate complex carbohydrates are in check, right? You're doing a moderate amount of healthy fats. So I always say everything in moderation when it comes to your macronutrients. I don't like to go overabundance. I don't believe in going incredibly high on protein, for example. I like to stay in moderation levels. The reason for that is your digestive tract. If you're taking in like there are a lot of these contest prep coaches out there for bodybuilding and fitness shows will tell their clients they want them to consume 400 to 500 grams of protein per day. In my opinion, that's detrimental on the kidneys. And you can get so much more nutrients from healthy fats and complex carbohydrates that you don't just have to rely on lean protein sources. Yes, you need protein to build muscle, but you don't need to have an abundance amount of protein to build muscle. So there's a lot of these misunderstandings that are out there when it comes to dietary nutrition. Um, but yeah, that's one of the big ones I see. So people not eating correctly. So like I said, whether they're eating too much food, not eating enough food, and not eating the right food. So you want to make sure that your diet is definitely in check. Another thing is when they're in the gym, they have no structure to their program. And I see this a lot. I see people going into the gym, wandering around aimlessly, and just kind of making up their workout as they go. Their workout makes no sense. And I talked about this briefly on one of my Instagram posts last week about when you're structuring a workout, it has to make sense. It's like a recipe, okay? If it doesn't make sense, it's not going to work. Okay, so you can't just throw anything together and expect to have great results. That doesn't work. So you have to put together a structured program. If you don't know how to do that, my recommendation, work with a trained professional that can help design a program specifically for you, your goals, your lifestyle, your genetics, potential injuries or health issues that you might have, physical limitations, etc. Okay, so that's very important. So that would be another one too. Going along with dietary nutrition is making sure that you have a structured program in place. Okay. But those are really the major ones that I see. Of course, I'll touch on this is the phones again. The phones are a major distraction in the gym, so I do see a lot of people sitting on whether they're sitting on machines or sitting on benches or standing around in the squat rack in between sets, resting for way too long on their phones, cruising Instagram, playing on TikTok, checking their emails. And what happens is they're giving the muscle too long to recover. If you go to train a muscle and it's 100% recovered, as in you're giving it 3 to 5 minutes of rest, it's not going to grow. Period. It won't. Okay. So, in my opinion, you're wasting your time. Okay. Will you get stronger? Maybe a little bit. But again, unless you're trying to be a power lifter, which most people are not, most people are going to the gym because they want to see results with their physique. They want to feel results. So you have to create that time under tension rule. And what I mean by that is you should be keeping your rest periods to no more than 90 seconds in between sets. I'm a firm believer that that's a huge distraction for people, and why a lot of people don't achieve the results they think they're going to achieve in the gym is because they're not pushing themselves hard enough. So those would be the three that come to mind. The dietary nutrition component, that's huge. Structuring a workout, making sure that you have the right workout in place in the right sequence order, that would be three. And then, of course, making sure, most importantly, in my opinion, this is going to be like one of the most important things is get off your phones, no distractions, tunnel vision, focus on what you're doing. If you're truly serious about achieving results with your health and your physique, you've got to be focused on your workouts and your diet. All right. Nick, what's the real difference between training for size versus training for strength? And can you do both at once effectively? Yeah, I've talked about this briefly in the past. So when I think of training for size versus training for strength, size would be more like the bodybuilders, right? We're training for the aesthetics component. So it's not just get bigger. It's, yeah, get bigger, but also make sure that you have an aesthetically pleasing physique. You don't want to have ridiculously large biceps and a ridiculously large chest and have these tiny little stick legs. So you want to create a symmetrical physique. So it's not just let's get bigger. Let's build a body that we can sculpt, the body that you're proud of, right? And that works for both men and women. So the difference between training for sculpting a physique, let's say, which is what bodybuilders do, that's more in the hypertrophy component, right? Whereas if you're training purely for raw strength, that's more in the powerlifting component. Powerlifters typically stick in that rep range of 1 to 3, sometimes up to 6 reps, depending on what they're doing. Whereas bodybuilders like to stick in that rep range from 8 to 15. Okay. Personally, what I like to do with most people I work with is stay in double digits. So I try to keep people between 10 to 15 reps. Okay. I find that works for multiple reasons. One, it's easy to stimulate the muscle fibers. It's easy to preserve the joints. So you're not putting too much tension on your elbows, your rotator cuffs, your hips, your knees, etc. Okay. And three, it also gets a great cardiovascular workout at the same time. Right. So I find it's a really good rep range to stay within for most people. I don't work with powerlifters. That's not my specialty. So I don't do low reps of anybody. There's no one I work with that we do 1 to 3 reps with. That's not my specialty whatsoever. I don't look for 1 rep maxes. That's never been my specialty. So it's something I don't do. But if you're asking what the difference between training for strength, which is going to be again what powerlifters do, versus training more for hypertrophy, which is more what bodybuilders do, it would be primarily the rep ranges. Sometimes the exercises as well. Powerlifters typically stick to more compound lifts, deadlifts, bench press, squats. Bodybuilders will do an assortment of exercises. So they'll do those 3 compound lifts as well, because those 3 lifts are important, even though I'm not a huge fan of deadlifts, but they are important. But they'll also throw in some refining exercises or defining exercises, right? So they'll throw in maybe some bicep preacher curls, dumbbell kickbacks. So exercises that are not necessarily mass builders, but will add a little bit more density and definition to the muscle belly itself. Okay, so that's the main difference. Bodybuilders are like artists. They're trying to sculpt a physique. You're not just training for pure size, you're training to sculpt. But here's the thing. If you are training, because your question is, can you train them both together? Of course you can, because if you are training effectively and you're utilizing your time in the gym efficiently, so you're doing your 10 to 15 rep range, you're trying to build an aesthetically pleasing physique, you're going to get stronger. Yeah, of course, because you're going in, day out. So you will get stronger. So you can do 2 at the same time. But you have to remember, pick your goal. Okay. Is your goal to be a powerlifter or is your goal to be a bodybuilder? Okay. Chances are, if you're watching these Q&As, even though you might not think of yourself as a bodybuilder, you are trying to sculpt your physique, build a more aesthetically pleasing physique. And let's say, who doesn't want to lose fat and build muscle? So you're going to want to keep your reps between 10 to 15 and train in hypertrophy. Okay. That's the best way, in my opinion, to sculpt the physique, work on your cardiovascular endurance at the same time, and improve your overall health and well-being. Okay. Nick, how can someone tell if they're actually recovering well enough to grow? Yeah, good question. So, what I've always used is this rule of thumb. I listen to my body and I really try to get my clients to listen to their bodies. And I have a lot of people I train who are stubborn. And if it were up to them, they'd be in the gym 7 days a week. And you know what? I'm in the gym 7 days a week. I was talking to one of my buddies last night and he said to me, he's like, Nick, man, he's like, I don't take days off either. I love training. But the reason why guys like him and I train and we don't get injured is because, again, we structure our programs correctly. We listen to our bodies. Okay, so if, for example, my knees are really bothering me one day, just because I have a scheduled leg day does not mean I'm going to train legs. If I feel like, you know what, I just need to warm up for a bit, stretch it out, do some dynamic stretches, and then I'm going to try doing some squats, I'll try that. And if it still doesn't work, you know, I'll say, you know what, I'm going to do legs tomorrow, or I'm going to do legs on Wednesday. Today's Monday, right? So I listen to my body. That's the best way to avoid injury is by listening to your body. So many people don't listen to their body, and it drives me insane. They try to work through injuries, so they try to mask it up with painkillers. They take copious amounts of Advil, Tylenol, whatever it may be. And you know that the problem with all that is Yeah, Advil is not terrible for you. However, if you take it every day, it burns on the intestinal tract, your stomach lining. So you don't want to be doing that. But yes, ibuprofen will help reduce inflammation. So take it as needed. But if you're taking stuff like that every day because you're in constant pain, because you're not recovering properly, you're going to ask for long-term ramifications from that. It could be numerous side effects that could be caused from that. Okay. And I'm not just talking about to your muscles, I'm talking about to your organs. Okay. So you got to be careful with these painkillers and anything that's going to reduce inflammation because usually there are some nasty side effects that come along with that long term if taken in abundance. Okay. So you want to make sure you're listening to your body. A good rule of thumb, I always, every person I work with, okay, and they'll tell you this. I always start everyone off with very light weights. Even if we're 40 minutes into a workout, I still start them on a new exercise with a light weight because the new exercise is a different plane and a different range of motion. So because we're utilizing a different plane and a different range of motion, I'm going to ensure that the client I'm working with is utilizing a weight that they could easily handle 15 reps for. Okay, because we're going to feel it, right? I call it a feel set. So we're just going to feel the set. How's it feeling? Everything feels good? Great. Let's start increasing the weight accordingly. So if you, again, it comes back to paying attention to what you're doing in a gym, listening to your body. And let's say you're even doing, let's say, a shoulder workout. And this has happened to me. Doing a shoulder workout, you're halfway through and you're doing, let's say, upright rows. And all of a sudden, you're like, that doesn't feel right on my rotator cuff. You'd be an idiot to keep doing the exercise. So you have to listen. So you know what? Maybe upright rows aren't for me today. So I'm going to pick another shoulder exercise. Maybe I'll do another rear delt fly for my posterior deltoids, or maybe I'll do another shoulder press for my anterior deltoids, or maybe I'll do another lateral raise for my medial deltoids, or maybe I won't do any shoulders. You know what? I'm going to throw in an ab exercise instead. Okay. So that would be the correct way to train in that scenario. So again, it comes down to listening to your body. So if you truly want to avoid injuries, you have to pay attention to what you're doing. And if something doesn't feel right, don't do it. Okay. And that comes with experience too. Okay. I will say that because when I was younger, there were plenty of times I'd walk into the gym and I'd have a lower back pain or I'd have knee pain or I'd have hip pain. And no matter what day it was, I'm like, if it's leg day, I'm doing it. But that caused problems for me down the road. Okay. And so I learned over the years as I got older to check my ego at the door and listen and say, you know what? Today's not a good day for me to do legs. I'm going to do chest and I'll come back and do legs tomorrow. That's fine too. Okay. So just really pay attention to your body. Do not overtrain. And I talked about this for the last few weeks. I've been talking about overtraining, how I don't believe overtraining truly exists for the average person. But for people like myself who are gym junkies who love training, yes, you could definitely overtrain if you're not training correctly. So the way to not train correctly would be to train the same muscle groups multiple times a week. So getting under the bar and doing bench press 3 or 4 times a week. You're asking for problems, okay? You are. So bench press once a week, squat once a week, deadlift once a week, okay? Work each muscle group once a week, move on. Okay, that's how you're going to avoid injury. Okay. Nick, why do some people struggle to grow their arms or chest despite training them regularly? Few reasons. Okay, one would be mobility and flexibility issues. So there's a lot of people I see in the gym, both men and women, when they're doing bench press, whether that be with a barbell or dumbbell, they're not going all the way down and focusing on the eccentric contraction. They're using partial reps. In my opinion, partial reps suck. I don't like them. Yeah, I know Ronnie Coleman used to do them, but he's a genetic freak. For most people, partial reps don't work. Okay, partial reps put too much strain on your joints, your ligaments, your tendons. Very little stress on your muscle bellies, which you're trying to stimulate your muscle bellies. Okay, you're trying to stimulate muscle fibers, and that's how you're going to grow your physique. So you need to utilize full range of motion. In order to do that correctly, you need to work on your mobility and flexibility. And I see a lot of guys, there's some women too, but a lot of guys who are guilty of this when they bench press is that the reason why they can't go all the way down is actually because their shoulders are too tight. A lot of guys, as they get older, they tend to round their shoulders forward. So when they do a bench press, they can't retract properly. Okay. And that puts a lot of strain on, like I said before, the rotator cuffs and the joints. Okay. So the elbows in this case. So you don't want to do that. So my recommendation is to focus on your mobility and flexibility so you can utilize full range of motion and get that eccentric contraction. Talking about the eccentric contraction, let's move over to the concentric contraction. That's another thing I see people doing in the gym. So many times I'll watch people, let's say even in bench press again, let's say they're doing a dumbbell bench press. I just see them throwing the weights up, just like this. Ballistic repetitions, using momentum. Okay. They're using synergist muscles. They're using their triceps. They're using their delts, but they're not really using the primary muscle group, which in the case of a dumbbell bench press would be pec major. Okay. Why are they doing this? Well, because they don't know how to create a strong mind to muscle connection. So they're not focusing on the concentric contraction, which would be coming up and squeezing the pecs together. Every rep I do on a dumbbell bench press, I squeeze my pecs together. I don't need to utilize 200-pound dumbbells to do that. I could get great results just by pushing 60-pound dumbbells, which is not very heavy for me, but when done correctly, I can feel that muscle both on the eccentric coming down and the concentric phase. Okay. And that's how you grow a muscle group like the chest, a muscle group like the biceps, same thing. Come up, flex your biceps, release, utilize full range of motion. Okay. When I see a lot of people in the gym when they do curls, what they do is they come up, but they come up like this. Now they're using their shoulder, right? So shoulder down, all the way down on your arm, come up chest level, get that concentric contraction, right back down again. There's no reason why when you're doing a curl, you should be coming up like this. You're utilizing your rotator cuff, okay? Not necessary. So you want to stimulate, not annihilate the joints, okay? Again, Lee Haney's quote, not my quote, but I truly believe in that quote because the goal here is to focus on the muscle belly so that you're going to grow your muscles. So it's not about just throwing around heavy weight. So in the case of the biceps or the case of the pecs, you really need to focus on utilizing that eccentric contraction, which is usually going to be the down phase in both the biceps and the chest. And you really want to focus on the concentric contraction, squeezing the muscle every time you come up. That's how you're going to build a chest, and that's how you're going to build better arms. Okay. So you need to focus on your mobility, your flexibility, the eccentric and concentric phase of the movement that you're doing. Okay. Uh, Nick, how can women gain muscle without fear of becoming too bulky? Not going to happen. Okay. And I've been saying this for years. Not going to happen. When you look at women in the gym who are what a lot of women feel are bulky, a lot of those women are taking anabolic steroids. A lot of those women are genetic freaks. A lot of those women are in the gym 7 days a week. And a lot of those women are just overall, when they're training, they are training with super heavy weights with probably lower repetitions. So they are staying in that maybe 6 to 10 rep range and they are putting on more muscle. Okay. But a lot of it has to do with the genetics and potentially even the anabolic steroid use. Okay. So I can tell you from doing this job now for 22 plus years, I don't have a single woman on my roster that I've ever worked with or continue to work with that has ever complained to me that they're getting too bulky, ever. Okay. Because I don't work with women who use anabolic steroids. I don't have anything against women that use anabolic steroids, but I don't work with women who use anabolic steroids. First of all, I wouldn't even know how to design an anabolic steroid cycle for a woman. Okay. I don't think women should take anabolic steroids. I think that the long-term side effects are way too dangerous versus a man. So I don't advise any women to take anabolic steroids. I truly don't. So I don't work with women who'd use them. So we can take that out. I also don't work with many genetic freaks. Okay. Very rarely do I get a genetic freak on my roster. Occasionally I might get someone who I'm like, wow, I can give you a lot of carbs and you're still losing weight. Great. Good for you. You won the genetic lottery. But a lot of people, most people I work with, no, they're not genetic freaks. Most people I work with are also not in the gym 7 days a week. They're in the gym 3 to 5 days a week. Okay. So because of that, they're not getting bulky. It doesn't happen. Never. 22 plus years has never happened. Okay. You have to remember too, as a woman, you have estrogen. Okay. You also have testosterone, but you have estrogen. And because you have estrogen, the ability for you to put on the size of muscle that a man is going to put on who has way more testosterone than you, double the amount of testosterone as you, is not going to be nearly the size. It's not going to happen. Okay. So again, unless you're a genetic freak, unless you're taking anabolic steroids, unless you're utilizing low repetitions in the gym and you're in the gym 6, 7 days a week, you are not going to get bulky. I can promise you that. I've never seen it happen. Okay. So forget it. Won't happen. All right. Nick, why do fat loss plateaus happen and what's the fastest way to break through one? In my experience, when I'm working with someone who's just come to work with me and they say, I don't know what's going on. I can't lose fat. I've tried everything. The first thing I ask to look at is their diet. Okay. Now, when I look at their diet, I'll ask for a 3-day log. And what I usually see when people who are having a hard time losing weight and they really are trying everything is that they're under eating. And when you undereat, what happens, your body almost goes into a state of starvation. Okay. Now, let's bear in mind that there's no problems with the thyroid. So this person's had their thyroid checked, so they don't have an inactive thyroid or anything like that. But they're saying to me, I don't know what it is. Maybe I'm getting older. Maybe my metabolism's slowing down. Not true. Metabolism does not slow down as you get older. Our hormones change as we get older, which could have an impact on your metabolism, but your metabolism doesn't just get slower because now you're 55 years old. That doesn't happen. Okay. So, what you need to focus on is your diet and your training. So, when I ask for that 3 day log and I say, oh, wow, this person's on 1,200 calories a day and they're 180 pounds. I'm like, you need way more calories than that. And then they're not consuming the right calories. Either their fats are too low, or their carbs might be a little too high, or they're not getting enough protein. So I'll look at their macronutrients and then I'll look at the micronutrients, the quality of the foods that they're consuming. So I'll see these little red flags. There's always red flags. Every single person that sends me a 3 day log, I always see red flags. Whether it's too much sugar, whether it's not enough fats, whether it's under eating, overeating, okay, or eating sporadically, there's always a red flag. Okay. So when I find those red flags, I point them out and I say, okay, this is what you're doing and we need to correct this. So if we take this, we take it out and we put this in, and now we're going to see how this goes for 2, 3 weeks. We're going to keep making revisions. And that's how I make changes to people's plans. Okay. But in my opinion, when people are really struggling and they really are at their limit, like, Nick, I've done everything. I'm like, they're doing too much cardio. A lot of these people are doing like an hour, 2 hours of cardio a day, and they're under eating. When you do that, like I said, your body goes into a state of starvation. Your metabolism now does start to slow down because, like, hey, I don't know what I'm being fed again. I'm not getting enough calories, so I need to take these calories in, burn them slowly. This is not a good way to diet. You talk to anyone that works with me online. The first thing they'll tell you on their nutritional plan, the first week that they work with me, they say, Jesus, this guy gives me so much food. And they don't understand because most people who come to work with me on a nutritional plan, I shouldn't say most people, but I'd say about 60 to 70% of clients that work with me is because they want to lose weight. I get some people that do obviously want to gain weight, but I would say 60 to 70 want to lose weight. And they're always shocked by how much food I give them. I say, just trust me, okay? Because it may look like a lot of food to you, but I'm only giving you clean food. I'm not giving you any bad food whatsoever. None. I allow 1 to 2 cheat meals on my diets per week. That's it. So every single meal that is on your plan are clean whole food sources, which means the micronutrients are at the highest standards. So even though it might look like a lot of food in volume, it's not going to be like, oh my God, I can't eat all this food. It's what I'm trying to do is retrain your body to take in good food. And then as we continue along with the plan, if it truly is too much food, I start to take it down. Okay. But I don't just take everything down. I've talked about in the past how I'm a firm believer in doing macronutrient rotation. So I constantly rotate the macros. 1 week carbs might be high, 1 week fats might be low, rotate proteins. Next week fats might be high, carbs might be low, rotate the proteins again, and so on. So I always change things up based on the results my client is achieving or not achieving. Okay. So when I see people who have hit a plateau, and they're working with me because that happens as well, then again, I change things up. So if I'm at a point with someone and they're not losing any weight, and I'm like, man, I've got this person doing 30, 45 minutes of cardio. I don't really want to give them more cardio. And I feel like I've already got them on pretty low calories. What am I going to do? Well, let's look at their weight training sessions. What are they doing in the gym right now? And so, you know what? I'm going to give you a little bit more calories, but I want you to add 1 more day of weights to your workout. Okay. And what that does, it helps build the more muscle. And again, the more muscle you have, it's easier to burn fat. So sometimes I'll do things like that too. If I'm working with someone who's like training in the gym 3 days a week, I'm like, you know what? I'd recommend what we do. We're going to actually increase your calories. So I'm going to give you maybe, I don't know, 50 grams more carbs a day, 30 grams more fat a day, and I'm going to give you another 60 grams more protein a day. And what I want you to do with that though, is I want you to do 1 extra day in the gym, not cardio, 1 extra day in the gym with weights. So that could be what split up your training workout. Okay. So we're giving more volume to the weights. And that usually works. So I always look to troubleshoot and what I can do with my client to help them surpass these plateaus. But I will tell you that 9 times out of 10, unless someone has a thyroid problem, the reason they're not losing weight is because they're either doing too little, as in the diet, they're under eating, or they're doing too much cardio. And that's what becomes a problem for a lot of people. And then, of course, you have people who are not doing enough and they're eating too much and not doing anything in the gym. Well, yes, but they're not doing everything they possibly can. So those people have not hit a plateau. they just need to get their ass in check. But I'm talking about people who are truly giving it everything they can and they're struggling and like they're frustrated because they're not losing fat. I can tell you again from doing this job for 2 decades plus, that's what I see. Under eating, overtraining, overdoing the cardio. When I say overtraining, I mean doing too much cardio. It's not usually weights, it's too much cardio. And we need to correct that. And once we correct it, the body can relax, the cortisol levels go down, and now the body fat starts going off. Very simple. I don't mean simple to do, but it's pretty straightforward. The formula is very simple, easy, very easy to follow. Okay. Okay. Nick, what are the red flags of bad fat loss advice that you recommend we should instantly avoid? So that kind of correlates with the last question. So I'll keep this one brief. When it comes to a lot of advice that I see online, when it comes to fat loss, you get a lot of these old school trainers out there who recommend their clients do an hour of fasted cardio in the morning, and then they do an hour of fasted cardio after their workouts. And I know a lot of coaches that will just give their clients so much cardio so early on in the workout, or so early on in the program, I should say, not the workout. So early on in their plan. So too much cardio. The problem when you start doing too much cardio, it's like going to a gunfight and you're shooting all your bullets in the air. You're using all your ammunition. So what happens when you hit a plateau and you're already doing 2 hours of cardio a day? Those first 3 or 4 weeks may have been great. Maybe you're losing 2 or 3 pounds, but then you hit that plateau. What do you do next? You're going to add an hour of cardio to your program? So what I see is people doing too much cardio too soon on their plan. My recommendation when I work with someone on a fat loss program, I start them with pretty much no cardio. I'm like, all right, well, we're going to start you with no cardio, just the weights right now. First week, you lost 2 pounds. Second week, you're not losing any weight. All right, let's add 20 minutes of cardio a day. So we're adding on a little bit. Okay. We're not using all our resources right away. Another thing that I see a lot of these fitness professionals doing is they're drastically cutting food, like from day one. And what I mean is day one on the plan. That kind of, again, correlates with the last question is they're giving their clients too little calories. And I see this so often when I have clients come and work with me and I say, well, let me see what you're doing. They're like, well, this is what my old coach had me on. And they show me, I'm like, how did you survive? I mean, I've done contest prep diets for myself, but I'm like, Jesus, the calories in your one day is what I would have in one meal. I'm like, so you can't survive on that. Will you lose weight? Yes, but you're going to hit a plateau. And then what happens when you hit a plateau and you're running on 800 calories a day? You can drop to 600 calories a day. So what happens when you're doing that is you're going to risk long-term side effects on your metabolism, on your thyroid. So you do not want to do that. Okay. So again, like I said in the last question, start off with a lot of calories. Hey, I'm losing all kinds of weight and I'm on like 3,000 calories a day. How am I doing that? Well, because we're utilizing those calories. We're taking in good calories. So we're looking at the micronutrients and we're utilizing them to put you to work on your workouts and your cardio. So you have lots of energy, you feel good, you sleep good, and you're losing fat, you're building muscle. Okay. So that's another mistake I see. So giving people too little calories and giving people too much cardio. And I know this kind of, again, it correlates with that last question. So that's why I want to keep this one brief. But if you want to avoid those two things, start your program off with the most amount of food, good food, that you possibly can get away with, and the least amount of cardio that you can possibly get away with. It's not that I'm against cardio. I think cardio is very important for the heart. But as I've said time and time again, if you're relying on cardio to burn fat, you're making a mistake because that is not a long-term solution. A long-term solution would be to focus more on the weight training, use cardio to work your heart, your cardiovascular system overall. But when you're doing the weight training, you're building muscle. So you're going to be able to keep the fat off long term. It's a more sustainable, more realistic goal to achieve. All right. So again, don't focus on just doing high amounts of cardio and dropping your calories too low because that will backfire. And honestly, you're going to feel like shit and you'll probably look like shit too because you're going to lose muscle, you're going to lose water, and you're not going to be sleeping well. And it's a disaster. So really pay attention that your diet's dialed in correctly and that your training is structured properly. Okay. Okay, one more question here. Uh, Nick, what's the minimum amount of exercise needed per week to lose fat effectively? So, this will again depend on the individual, right? So, first of all, how much fat do you have to lose, right? That's number one. how long are you giving yourself to lose this fat? If you're someone who is, let's say, 50 pounds overweight and you're giving yourself 6 months to lose that weight, I personally think that's a realistic goal. However, if you're only in the gym twice a week, I'm going to tell you, you're probably not going to hit that goal. Now, if you're in the gym, let's say 4 to 5 times a week and your diet's dialed in, then you can definitely hit that goal. Absolutely. Okay. So you have to be realistic with your expectations and what you're willing to do. I work with a lot of people who, when they first come to work with me, whether it be in-house or online, a lot of times they're really motivated and they'll say to me, I need to lose 30 pounds, for example. I'm willing to do whatever you tell me to do. I'm willing to eat, sleep, and train. I'm willing to be in the gym 5 days a week. I'm willing to be in the doing cardio 7 days a week. I'll eat like rice and chicken for the rest of my life. I'm like, look, that sounds great right now, but I promise you by week 2 or 3, you're going to want to give up because you're changing too much of your lifestyle. So let's implement a strategy that it's not going to completely do a 180 on your lifestyle so that you can still actually go out and be social with friends and family members, that you don't have to be in the gym 7 days a week and you don't have to cut your calories drastically. Okay, let's make little changes, and those little changes will create big changes with your physique and your health long term. And what I usually tell people, it's actually the changes that you're making are more habit. Okay, they're more we're turning what we call bad habits into good habits. And once you're able to turn those bad habits into good habits, and now those habits, those good habits have become more of a realistic lifestyle change for you, they no longer become this like strict, oh, I can't eat that, or oh, I got to go to the gym. It's like these are things that you actually enjoy. Oh, I actually enjoy my diet. I enjoy going to the gym. I enjoy going to bed at a reasonable hour. I enjoy not waking up hungover the next day. I enjoy not having feeling bloated or lethargic or tired or irritable because of my diet. I enjoy not having to rely on stimulants. Okay, so I always tell people we should be trying to focus more on changing habits first. Okay, and setting those smart goals. So specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely goals. All right. So making sure that you're giving yourself enough time to accomplish your goal, that's very important too. So that's why I tell people, like, whatever your goal is, now if someone tells you they want to win Mr. Olympia and they've never been to the gym in their life, I'm gonna say that's a very hard goal to achieve. So you might want to set a realistic goal. Okay, that's why I talk about the SMART goals. Okay, you might become Mr. Olympia one day, but for now, let's just get you in the gym 4 or 5 times a week training. Let's clean up your diet a little bit, and then we'll go from there. Okay, we'll reassess in 6 months. Because if you try to do too much too soon, in my experience, that backfires in someone's face always. It really does. Very rarely do I see someone stick to a plan when they're doing a complete 180 with their diet and with their training. So I just try to make small adjustments along the way. It takes us a little longer to get there, but once we do get there, it's so easy to maintain those results because we've changed the bad habits into good habits. So now going to the gym 4 or 5 times a week, no trouble. Now following a clean diet, that's easy. Now making sure you go to bed at a reasonable hour, making sure you're hydrating, you're hydrated properly, you don't have to think about it. Okay. So again, it's turning those bad habits into good habits. And if we do that in a slow and controlled manner, that's going to achieve the ultimate success. All right. So that's my recommendation. If you truly want to keep the fat loss off and you truly want to, keep building muscle on a continuous basis, you have to make sure whatever plan you're following is sustainable. Because as I said time and time again, if it's not sustainable, it will not be successful. Anyway, that's it for this week's No Filter Q&A. This episode will be going up on Monday, December the 8th. As a reminder, if you have any questions related to your nutritional plan, workout program, supplements you are currently taking, not taking, or considering taking, please feel free to email me those questions at nick@foreverfitperformance.com, or you can DM me your questions on my Instagram at fitcosgrove_. Thank you all for watching. Thank you for supporting my YouTube channel, my online coaching business, as well as my in-house personal training business here in Vancouver, British Columbia. I truly do appreciate all the support and all the feedback that I receive from each and every single one of you. Thank you all once again, and I will see you all next week. Bye for now.